Welcome to the Dystopian Renaissance. We cover spirituality, healing, consciousness, and truth. In this chaotic world we live in, it's important to get out of the matrix, and we'll do just that with biohacking, nutrition, spiritual awakenings, alternative healing, and freedom. This is the Dystopian Renaissance, and this is your host, Johnny Sage.
Welcome to the Dystopian Renaissance. I am your host, Johnny Sage. I am sitting today with Rod Noble. He's an author, energy healer, awakening coach, and shamanic practitioner. Rod, thank you for coming today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me here.
You're welcome as well, Ed. You have a very interesting story. Your healing journey, it started a while ago, right?
Yeah, I think my healing journey was spread out over a long period of time. Probably started in high school when somebody gave me some LSD, and I just started to see through the facade of social, cultural reality, and I could just start seeing through everything, through the nonsense in my own family, through the media, the news, and all that kind of stuff. So I think that would be the first door opening, and then it continued with different authors and influences that I've had over the years.
Yeah, that's interesting. Unfortunately, my awakening wasn't until later in life, so you're lucky that it happened in the high school stage, because I knew something was wrong, but I just didn't know what, because no one was awake around me. So, but do you think that's why psychedelics were illegal or taboo for so long? There's a lot of propaganda about them because they had the potential to wake people up and see outside the matrix?
Well, Terence McKenna talked about some of this. The reason that psychedelics scared the powers, the controllers, whatever you want to call them, is because it actually changes the way you think, and it causes you to ask questions beyond the mainstream narrative. So that's what the threat was, I think, to the controllers, or whatever you want to call them.
That makes sense, because like you said, you start viewing things differently, because before that, at least for me, I just thought something was wrong with me. I wasn't happy no matter what I was doing the things I was told would make me happy. I tried different jobs, white collar, blue collar, and nothing worked. I'm like, this is it. But there's it must be because these other people seem happy. But you're right. I found psychedelics kind of have that potential that you start seeing, oh, wait, there's these other ways that are possible that we're just not seeing it. So, or they're not really being discussed in the mainstream. So is that kind of what you were noticing too, that this was just a dead-end lifestyle, the way people were living and we were told to live?
Yeah, it's, suffering begins with the phantom ego self as it navigates its way through the illusionary ego matrix reality. So, people get unhappy because they get into this hungry ghost thing where they want satisfaction. I want my parents to feel this way about me. I want my parents to treat me this way. I want my brother to treat me this way. I want all this respect from my job. I want my partner to treat me this way. All this kind of stuff, and it just keeps going on and on and on. Of course, hardly any of those are ever met, right? When do your parents just wake up and say, I'm going to treat Johnny different today? Or when does your boss say, hey, I had this dream, I'm going to completely treat you different today? So we get into these loops of nothing works the way we want it to work. And oftentimes we're not seeing the larger picture because, there's lessons going on at a very high level. And, the family dynamics and relationships that we have are all based on past life karma. So there's definitely a lot going on behind the scenes with all that stuff. So, yeah, people get unhappy because they start to see through the facade of all this, and it just doesn't work anymore. So,
Yeah, and that's a great point you brought up. And I've heard like monks talk about something along those guidelines, like when you try to control something you can't control, and that's one of the root causes of suffering. So that seems to be related to what you're saying too. But it's easier said than done as well, because you're right. Like we have this feeling that we want things to go our way, and if they don't, we kind of get frustrated, you know.
yeah, yeah,
But it's not. You're right. How often do other people really think about every other person? You know, it's
yeah,
like they're
yeah.
probably in their own little movie going through their
Right,
routine.
right.
And that was, you talked about how you awakened, but you're also spiritual too. Like, when did that start coming into your, like, when did you start noticing an inclination towards spirituality?
Well, that's a really good question, and I'm glad that you brought this up because it seems, and this has been true with a lot of people, and probably me too, is that working with psychedelic plants, entheogens or whatever you want to call them, seems to only take you to a certain level. At that point, you have to sort of look at where you're at and bring in like a new relationship with the divine. And that's what I learned from Eastern mysticism, like some of my teachers, Avatar Meher Baba, Paramahansa Yogananda, Swami Vivekananda. It's basically developing a relationship with the divine, because that's what we all are, right? We're divine beings. So then you start loving yourself, loving God. It gives a new purpose to life than just going to another Burning Man party or taking another trip with your friends out in the jungle or whatever. And a lot of times that can even fall into the ego matrix, because I've seen people, online, like planning these ego death experiences for months and months. Then they go down to the Amazon, they have an incredible ayahuasca journey. Then they post it all over their social media with the sexy people that they're with and the cool looking shaman. And I'm thinking, well, I guess the ego death experience didn't work.
Yeah.
So,
And that's a very good point. And I'm glad you brought that up, because while I'm a big proponent of plant medicines and psychedelics, they have a amazing purpose and amazing capabilities, but there's definitely wrong uses for them too, and people abuse them as well. I would say, even, at least what I've seen, more often than not too. So it's because, and I've seen people they tend to pass on the integration aspect of it as well. It's like they could see these profound, or have these profound experiences or see these profound visions. Then, like, afterwards, they'll like just dust their hands off and be like, "Oh, back to the cubicle," like here was something that could have changed their whole life around, and they experienced it, but then they just threw it away right after, and it was kind of disheartening to see that, because I was like blown away, but I noticed I was the rare exception, at least in like the circles that I was going to start with. Have you ever seen have you experienced stuff like that?
Like what?
Or to see people just like kind of throw away or like abuse the medicines?
Yes, definitely. It turns into a hungry ghost kind of thing. Like you're living for your next hit of DMT or your next ayahuasca experience. Like your life becomes based on, well, if I can just get to the Amazon, I'll be happy. Or, life sucks this week, but next week I'm going to take DMT, so everything's going to be fine after that. It doesn't work like that. Your life has to be a magical experience every day, not just when you're taking plant medicines. So
yeah, and I think you're the one who had that great post about Burning Man, how it got really commercial post 2008, I think was the year. Maybe that wasn't the exact year, but the concept was certainly right. And it's not just Burning Man, but a lot of those festivals. Some people don't want to admit that either. I talked to this one young lady, and she would spend like $5,000 to $8,000 to go to Burning Man for the week. And I'm like, she was completely oblivious. I was just thinking, isn't that like kind of against the point to just go out camping in the desert?
Yeah, I think for me, I went 3 times. It was an interesting experience. I think the danger comes, when you're attached to the importance of it. Like it's important to be there. And if you don't make it, oh, I'm depressed, that kind of thing. You don't want to get into that kind of modality with anything, much less a Burning Man or dance festival. Or you don't want those things to have that kind of power over you.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
it seems like the events just become kind of like the event. It's not just the experience. It's just like kind of saying you went. And I wouldn't even really want to do plant medicines in that type of environment. Would you? It just see, because sometimes like your aura and other things can be opened up. So, and there's definitely some sketchy people that go to those things.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up because that kind of bleeds into energy healing. Now, I went, my first time was nearly 20 years ago, and I didn't know enough about how the aura is like a electromagnetic sponge, and it can pick up energies from other people, and some of these energies can be harmful. I've heard stories of people flipping out at these festivals. I've heard stories of people flipping out in the Amazon, from God knows what, but there are energies, entities, malevolent thought forms that float around in these kinds of environments. You have to be really careful with that because things like that can get stuck in your aura and can do you psychological harm. So if you're going to Burning Man or any kind of dance party or any gathering where there's a lot of different energies, you definitely want to make sure that you clean your energy body, your aura, before you come home, especially taking plant medicines
Yeah.
as well, because that makes you even more vulnerable to intrusive energies.
Yeah, it does make you more susceptible, I found too. And
Mhm.
I had to learn about spiritual hygiene as well. And I also found out
I
just
like that word, spiritual hygiene.
It-
I
it's
haven't
true,
heard
right?
that
A
one
good term,
before.
right? It's definitely applicable. But you don't think of it, even especially when you're new to like when you're just starting on your healing journey and stuff. It's like
Mhm.
you think, oh, and that's the other point I want to bring up is not just because people say they're conscious or spiritual doesn't mean they have good intentions. There's predators in this field as well, and so that's why like assaults and sexual assaults happen at a lot of these festivals too. So and and they're not always encouraged to be talked about too, because there's that new age crowd. They're just like, oh, just think positive and just go on. So it's like, that's why a lot of them aren't reported. So yeah, you still have to be careful, like on multiple levels, like the energetic aspect and still the physical aspect as well. And I'm glad you brought up energy healing too. And how'd you get started in that?
Well, it seemed like a natural evolution for my work to investigate it because some things happened to me. It was 2005. I went to actually a Steve Roach concert out in Tucson, Arizona, and the hotel that I happened to stay in, this was not known. Steve recommended the hotel, but he did not know that it was haunted, and a lot of really bad things happened there. So there were these malevolent energies already there from like several different tragedies that had happened at the hotel. It was actually listed as the most haunted hotel in the Southwest, in Tucson, Arizona. They actually built it on top of a Native American burial ground where the Native Americans buried their criminals, rapists, and murderers. So, it was
Yeah.
ripe for a lot of really bad things. And then there were a lot of tragedies that happened there. That's too long to go into, but something came on to me, and it actually followed me home. And this was like, 2005, 17 years ago. I did not know nearly as much about, how to keep your energy body clean back then. I actually called the Paranormal Society of Tucson and told them I think I picked up something at the Santa Rita Hotel because there were noises in the house. I was having thoughts that weren't my own. And when I'd close my eyes, I would see like 1904 newspaper articles and stuff like that.
Oh.
I think as though something had jumped into my consciousness, and they gave me some protocols to follow to get rid of it. Burn sage, all around the house, and I started looking into some things, and I discovered like 432 hertz is a good frequency to work with. They don't like malevolent and energies and entities. Don't like 432 hertz, and also blue orbs, because blue is color of Krishna. It's the color of bliss and peace and lucidity. So I would work with blue orbs to clean energies off of me whenever I would pick something up. The most recent thing that happened was, this was probably only 3-4 years ago. I went to ArcLight Cinema in Hollywood, one of my favorite places to go to when I lived in Pasadena, by myself, to see a movie, Venom. I would never see a movie like that now. I must have been a little bored back then. So I went and I picked up a negative entity from the movie theater, because the movie was pretty negative. And I think some of these production companies, maybe they work with frequencies, or maybe they put things in the movie to summon some of these energies up. I'm not sure. I've heard things like that. But I worked with sage, blue orb, and 432 hertz, and got it right off of me in about 15-20 minutes. So
Wow.
anyone that's listening that has these problems, they can work with those 3 things.
Thanks for the recommendation
Yeah.
for everyone. And I've heard that too, because I was a movie guy growing up, and I don't watch them anymore. But as you kind of awaken, I've noticed like I tend to prefer nature over just like sitting down, and it doesn't really resonate with me anymore. But that's what I heard. Like I like horror movies, but I heard like they were just kind of meant to keep us in a low vibrational state and like a fear state. And that does make sense. So, and also even in some of the music too, that there's different frequencies that are meant to like keep you angry or all like in an agitated state. So I thought that was really interesting. I know there's the 432 versus 440 hertz debate, and also I think it's whole note or just intonation as well. So like they changed the music around too, so it's not in its natural state. So it's definitely something to be explored that way if it's a topic that interests you. And yeah, that's amazing. And did you like hear about it from someone, or did you get drawn to like Reiki or a different type when they do on others?
Did I hear about what?
How did you know like which type of energy healing to learn about or study?
I read some books and listened to some videos, and and just some of it came naturally, just working with my own energy field, and making sure I was clean myself.
Oh, that's good. And the shamanic aspect that you offer, how did you get into that?
That has developed over a long period of time, just being fascinated with ancient cultures, indigenous cultures, plant medicine, wisdom. I was involved with some of the first people that brought ayahuasca to Los Angeles in the mid-90s. We did a big ceremony out in Malibu.
Oh, wow.
At this huge estate overlooking the ocean. It was like, wow, and I got to experience that, and just became fascinated with that whole thing, tribal shamanism, and DMT, which is basically the hard-hitting ingredient in ayahuasca.
Yeah, how was it being an early adopter of ayahuasca here? Because back then, no one really knew what it was here yet, right? Were people unsure of it, or they were willing to give it a try?
Well, I wasn't new to plant medicine then, because I had years of work with psilocybin. So I took to it really well, because all the tryptamines are similar in, the experiences they produce. But I think the biggest thing for me, and I'm still shocked over it, is how big ayahuasca has become. Like it's become like this whole tourism industry. And back then, I would have never imagined it. I was thinking, a plant that makes you sick. Who's gonna? This will never take off. Boy, was I wrong. I guess the thing is, when the shamans that I worked with, they were the Shuar from Ecuador. They put specific herbs in ayahuasca that actually cleansed your blood as well. So I felt tremendous for 2 weeks after that. And I don't know, I hear different experiences of what people are having in the Amazon now, but I would certainly recommend anyone looking for that kind of experience, go for those blood cleansing herbs as well, because you feel really good afterwards.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. And that's a good point. Is I've heard that in the different countries in South America, they'll have like different versions of ayahuasca. Like Peru's just usually the plain ayahuasca, Colombia's yahe, and then in Ecuador, like they have a different version as well. So I thought that was interesting how they have different blends, but they all do basically the same thing or have a similar effect on the person.
Yeah.
And how, did you notice any difference between psilocybin and ayahuasca? I know they have like a similar effect, but they're also different as well. I found at least. Yeah,
that's another thing. Excellent question. I write about it in my book, Soul Hacker's Guide to Awakening, which, by the way, I brought a copy for you.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
I have a chapter in there where I talk about plant medicines, entheogens, and the quantum field of consciousness. This is something that really no one is talking about, and I'm not sure why. Different species of mushrooms will hold information from the region that they grow in the quantum field of consciousness. So let me give you an example. If you wanted to learn about the Mayan civilization, well, there's magic mushrooms that grow in that region, okay? So you would want to take those, and then during your experience, these particular mushrooms will, if you can get into a deep enough state or trance with them, they will deliver information about the Mayan civilization because they're holding that information in the quantum field of consciousness. So, and the same with ancient India, the same with Egypt. People don't realize this. There's mushroom motifs all over Egypt. No one is talking about it. I think maybe Graham Hancock talked a little bit about it once, but it's amazing. I've been looking into that, and once I get to the point where I start doing my audio visual presentations, I'm going to include some of those images from Egypt.
Oh yeah, please do. That's the first I heard of it. So and I'm into this. So
there should be entire teams going out to these ancient civilizations and taking psilocybin grown from the region to channel this information. Imagine what secrets that you could get from ancient Egypt just being there and journeying on local Egyptian mushrooms.
It makes sense though, because the one thing I did hear pertaining to ayahuasca, it was like, because how did they figure out that technology? Because you have to combine the vine and the roots, the MAO inhibitor, and like you said, the DMT. But they grow in different parts of the jungle, and at that point, they didn't have machines to test things or stuff like that. So they just had to know, like, this plant when this plant and what dosage of each would have this effect, and you can't just like guess at that, So how are they figuring that? How are they getting that information?
I've had this discussion before. Another very good question. And you win the award for good questions today.
Thank you.
And now my answer is very different than the shamans that practice ayahuasca medicine.
Because their answer is just that they saw it on ayahuasca, right?
Well, they believe that there's like a Gaian mind there that, like a plant kingdom mind that gives them that information, like an intuition.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's partly correct, but I'm going to take that a bit further. this is not the first universe that we've been in. Now, there's proof to that on a lot of these ancient glyphs. Like in Egypt, there's pictures of helicopters and speedboats. There were no helicopters and speedboats in ancient Egypt. So where were they getting that information? They were getting that information from previous universes, and that information is stored in the quantum field of consciousness, or the Akasha, or some traditions call it the oversoul. So, okay, I got lost for a second. What question was I answering?
Oh, well, getting how they figured out how to put the ayahuasca blends together.
Ayahuasca, okay. They figured it out because ayahuasca's happened before, and that information was already in the quantum field.
Wow. That actually makes sense, and I never thought about that. So I appreciate you bringing these answers that definitely I have that are new to me. So like I said, as you know, this is topics I've explored before. So this was a pleasant surprise, being caught off guard like this.
Well, all knowledge is old knowledge. I mean, there's people running around, worshiping these teachers. So-and-so said this, and did you hear this teacher say that? And so-and-so had a presentation that just blew my mind last night, and all this stuff. All knowledge is already known. It's all in the quantum field. Anyone, even like Einstein, he did not create the theory of relativity. It already existed. All he did was channel it.
Wow.
Even like Paul McCartney, that wrote Yesterday, like one of the best songs ever, right? He said he dreamed it. Came to him in a dream. So, where is this information coming from? It's already there. We just channel it. And that's one interesting thing that people don't talk about with psychedelics as well. It creates novel brain synaptic activity. And that novel brain synaptic activity opens portals to these information downloads. People also call them codes now. Like, did you download the codes or whatever? These downloads of infinite knowledge that are out there that we can't normally access. But with psychedelics, they open a porthole and will let you download this information if you're good at working with medicine.
Yeah, that's really interesting too, because, and I have explored that topic too, or just even exploring like where do regular ideas come from when we think of, like someone says, I got a good idea out of nowhere. Like, did they really? And I always question that. It's and some people theorize that there's like some type of spirit like giving you like basically the equivalent of whispering in your ear or something. I mean, maybe not literally, but that I like what you said too, because that makes, I think that's easier for someone who might not be spiritually inclined for them to grasp, because that does make sense.
Yeah.
And it sounds more than just like some type of ghost or something, which who knows, it could be.
Well, what is a ghost? People have all kinds of labels. What does someone mean when they say, I got an idea? What does an I mean? Are they talking about their ego self or their infinite God being self?
Yeah.
Because there's two things going on.
And it seems like people are accepting there's more to us than just like what we see here.
Yeah.
That we can't prove it yet necessarily, but it is becoming more of an accepted theory that they are people. I think people are kind of like grasping, getting more back into spirituality, I think, like they used to in like Egyptian times. And yeah, it's interesting that you brought up the fly technology too. I just heard this like a month or so ago, but someone was saying that, and he posted the picture, like even in India, like the Vedic text showed like basically a plane, like this device that would allow the person to fly. And this was before the Wright brothers too. So we keep saying, the Wright brothers invented the first plane, but that doesn't appear to be the case. And it's like, what is the real history? It seems like there's so much more than what we were being told,
Yeah. They channeled it. That's what happened.
Yeah, that would make more sense. And even because it's crazy, there's some things that we can't explain. Like there's architecture in Peru and other countries. We don't have the technology to build that today. So how did we actually regress then? And it's weird how some more people aren't curious about that. And it doesn't make sense even with the Egyptian pyramids. Now they're saying like it sounds like technology that was able to lift those, which actually would make more sense because they probably seen the cymatic videos where like it's on a much smaller scale, but the reverberation just kind of has structures float in the air.
You have to ask yourself, how did they get that information? Where did it come from? And I have a chapter in my book about psychedelics as ancient technology. You take mushrooms, for instance. Spores are microscopic. I mean, if you were a interplanetary visitor, you could take like millions of species of psychoactive mushrooms in a little test tube. Also, spores are covered in one of the hardest known substances on Earth. They can withstand the vacuum of space. So these spores are planetary jumpers. So why is there an intelligent plant species that has the ability to jump from planet to planet? I mean, that sounds like something technological. And another thing, and I don't know if anyone has ever done experiments like this, but years and years ago, I was with a group. Everyone had taken like 5 grams of very potent psilocybin. It was about 5 guys, except for me. I was the designated driver. Okay, so I was completely sober. So we took this out in the woods in Missouri. Well, it got really cold overnight, so we couldn't stay out in the woods. We had to drive back to one of the guys' house. Fortunately, I was sober and I could drive, but all 4 of the other guys were just like flying, man, you know. So they were really uncomfortable about this, but I told them that I could drive. So we were driving through town, and guess what? 2 or 3 cars pulled over and let us go by. And I looked at our lights. Our lights were so bright, we looked like an emergency vehicle or something because other cars were pulling over. Now, what is going on in everyone's energy field to affect something electronic like car lights in that way? Has this ever been used before in ancient times? Did people get together by the hundreds and hold hands and create a circuit? I think so. I was told during one of my channeling sessions recently, actually, when I was writing this, that, you know, in Ancient Aliens, they have those, it's the Mahabharata, I guess, the book, where they talk about the big ships battling in the sky. Those are consciousness ships. Those are hundreds of practitioners creating, I call it 5th dimensional hole punching, where consciousness pulls information from the quantum field and makes it physical or semi-physical. And then you've got the opposing civilization or group that are doing the same thing, and you get this airship battle. But what it is, it's pure consciousness creating physical forms, and consciousness is amplified by these psilocybin mushrooms.
Wow. And were these type of trips your inspiration to write this book, or was it an accumulation of all sorts of experiences?
Accumulation of all sorts of experiences. Right now, for me, I'm very much into meditation, Eastern mysticism. I don't really journey that much at all with the plants. I think you get to a certain point where you have to kind of move beyond that. I think they're very, very helpful in accomplishing certain things, like what I said earlier. If you wanted to hack into the quantum field of a certain area, if you're looking for an ego death experience, a real one, it's very valuable for that. That's what people should be using it for certain specific reasons. Just to go to parties and get high, I think that falls short for me. I don't know whether to. I mean, I've done it myself, so I can't curse it or condemn it or anything like that. But I would encourage those that want to go down this path to take it a little bit more serious and work with the big 3 for me are peyote, ayahuasca and psilocybin. Now, other people will argue, well, what about, this or that, or what's that other one? Starts with an S on my
San
mind.
Pedro?
Salvia. Well,
Salvia. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
San Pedro is in the same family as peyote, so
Yeah.
same thing.
Similar.
Very similar. So, but there's other things people work with. But I would stick with those three. They're going to give you your best chance at accomplishing what you want to accomplish.
Yeah, I agree. Like now I kind of cringe when I hear people using plant medicines to use them recreationally or go to a party. It's like, oh, now I know what they're really capable of. Because when I was in college, people just used them recreationally and no one knew better. But now I realize how much potential they have. Like they could really make you much more of a moral person. And just for me, they just gave me an objective view of myself I never would have been capable of otherwise, especially at that stage of my healing journey. So you're right. Now, I mean, and I can't judge because that's, people are going to do what they're going to do. But I just hope, like you said, people consider what they're really capable of and at least give that method a try.
I think that also what we know about them and how they're being practiced right now is like maybe 1 out of 10 is like a 2. I think in ancient times, people really knew how to work with these medicines, like pyramids. I think they, were taken on top of pyramids. Pyramids to me are downloading stations. It's where consciousness can download like these hyperdimensional quantum infinite knowledge codes or whatever. And I think that's how they got a lot of the knowledge and, how they incorporated that knowledge into their culture and things like that. So I don't think I think the potential is barely being scratched, the surface. And, healing, like you take a shaman like Maria Sabina that could actually pull cancer out of people while on an incredible high dosage of mushrooms. That seems almost technological to me, pulling cancer out of someone.
Yeah. I've heard like on other plants too. I think it was Sharik Sanango. Like I've heard like a good shaman, which is rare, but they're able to like just pull out Lyme disease, the entity that causes that. And it's crazy because that's a hard one for people to find relief from if they didn't catch it right away. So it's amazing. You're right. And I've wondered that too. How do they know that as well? So, and what you said kind of makes sense. And yeah, I think the pyramids are capable of much more than we're being told they are, obviously, because I've heard that they even had sound healing chambers in them.
Oh, absolutely.
Like frequency healing was big back then.
Yeah, frequency healing, ceremony. There would be like in the Great Pyramid, things set up to move your consciousness forward rapidly, and probably plants were incorporated into that too.
Wow. So yeah,
a lot of that's been lost. A lot of that knowledge has been lost.
Yeah, it's such a shame too, because I've always been inclined to like wonder what humans are really capable of. It just seems like we're so much more than like just like the average human, how they're living life today, just completely asleep. They go to work, go to Burger King on their lunch break, go maybe watch a little hour or two of TV, go to bed and start do the cycle all over.
That's a little sad, and it kind of brings up one of the things that I wanted to talk about actually, and that's soul evolution. Why do some of these people lag behind others? What is the explanation for that? Like, why does someone experience trauma in this lifetime and suffering, and others don't? Others seem to have everything handed to them, and good luck, and good health, and fortune, and all this stuff. So, what's really going on? I mean, that's something that I've contemplated every day for the past 10 years. And you really have to dig into Eastern mysticism to get those answers. And a lot of it has already been written about and talked about. Like karma balancing itself over many lifetimes, trauma. I've gone into deep meditations over trauma because I have some really good friends that follow me that have been through that. And the conclusion I came to was that souls sometimes spend too long in the astral plane, so they need to catch up with souls that have had more incarnations. So one of the ways to catch up is to have a traumatic experience, because how many people that you've met that have had a traumatic experience haven't been open-minded? Trauma people have been the most open-minded people that I've ever met. And people without trauma, a lot of them are closed-minded. So, and another way to look at it is like climbing Mount Everest. Now, for me, climbing Mount Everest would be miserable because I don't like cold weather. I don't like heights. I don't like cold wind. It would be miserable. But there's some people that just thrive on the challenge of climbing Mount Everest and being at the top. Well, trauma is like the spiritual Mount Everest. It's like, you're attracted, you're not attracted to the suffering of trauma, you're attracted to the conquering of it. And that's what people need to know and tell themselves. And also, you have to think like, what if I told you, hey, Johnny, I know for sure you suffered in the year 1749. You were abused by your father. You were abused by 3 or 4 other people. Your life was miserable. You'd say, thank God it's not happened to me now. It wasn't me, right? You'd be, thank God it wasn't me, right?
Yeah.
Well, trauma victims should be telling themselves that every day, because what you really are is an infinite God-light being. Infinite God-light beings don't get traumatized. So it wasn't you that it happened to, and neither was it you in 1749. I like to think that way. Now, psychologists might tear into me, but from an Eastern mysticism point of view, that's a healthy way to look at it, that it really wasn't you, because now you're a completely awakened divine being, and that was something else that happened a long time ago.
Wow, that's really interesting. And so basically you're saying is it's the people that wake up or go through trauma, because it's the version I heard that were the people that are awake now is we're more evolved souls, and the people that aren't capable of waking up this lifetime, they're less evolved. They've had less incarnations. They might be like younger
Newer
souls.
souls.
Yeah, newer souls. So what you're saying is it could be the other way around, right? Like people that are awake or have to go through traumas, we're less evolved, so we have to experience them to play catch up, right? Evolve faster and catch up to where everyone else is.
Well, the newer soul thing has thrown me for a loop, because in Tibetan Buddhism, they say all souls were created at the same time. So how can there be a newer something when everything was created at the same time? So I tend to think of it as some souls spend a longer time in the astral plane because it's so pleasurable. And there, time, in the astral plane, time doesn't exist like we think it exists. So it's easy to get sort of enraptured in those non-physical planes where everything's blissful, and you're thinking, I don't want to go back to 3D reality where there's suffering and density and pain and ignorance and fear and greed and all this stuff. So that creates like souls that are behind other ones, because they're, there for a certain reason, overcoming something. Now, there's also balancing of karma, and I don't want people that have had trauma to focus on this kind of thing, but karma does balance itself out, and sometimes people that have done really bad things to other people, that will follow you into other lifetimes. but it's not necessarily always the case. And if it is the case, don't feel attached to that either. Say, hey, you know, I'm not responsible for what I did in past lifetime. I'm a awakened divine being now. I'm not attached to what I did in 1749 or whatever.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And wow, that's definitely an interesting way to look at it. So,
yeah.
and if someone's new, hasn't done plant medicines before, how would you recommend they go about it? Like, is there one plant you recommend to start with, a certain setting?
Well, that's in my coaching. I try to find out where people are at, you know, spiritually, you know, what kind of traumas they've had, you know, what their experience level is. You know, there's some people I've talked to that, you know, have had a lot of trauma in their background. They, hey, I want to do DMT. I'm like, I don't know. Or, you know, I want to do, you know, 3 cups of the strongest ayahuasca there is so I can overcome that trauma. Doesn't work that way because the psychedelics are going to put all that right into your face. You're going to have to deal with it. And some people can't, and that can cause a really difficult experience.
Yeah.
You know,
And I will say, like, from what I've been told, I don't know if you found this true, is like the plants will only show you like what you're able to handle. Like if they're done responsibly, like if you're just doing a crazy amount of cups or something.
Mhm.
And because I did have one ceremony I was at early on, there was this woman who I could tell definitely wasn't ready. She was still like a little unstable and not adjusted. And she did 5 cups of ayahuasca and she didn't feel, nothing happened. So
Wow.
nothing happened. Yeah, which is crazy because granted, like that was probably towards the lighter end of medicines, blends that I've done of that, but it still did the trick.
And you were there and you took it and you did have an experience?
Yeah, I did 2 cups the first night. It was a 2-nighter, 2 cups the first night, and I still had it. Like I said, it was a little bit lighter than normal, but it still worked. So I couldn't imagine 5 cups of even a light blend. Like that would have been crazy. So it does seem to have that effect. But like you said, especially when like people ask about like 5-MeO DMT or these other ones, someone told me, a friend said, you should, like, he's like, I always tell people they develop a spiritual practice first, because if they do it before that and they don't have any way to integrate, like it can be shattering for some of them too. If they do it, if they just start with that. And like you said, they're not ready to handle it because while I heard, like I said, it only shows you what you're able to handle. You still want to be careful too, because I've heard of examples of it going the other way too.
Yeah, I've heard stories, firsthand stories of people passing out and breaking glass tables open, and people passing out in tents and hitting their head and all kinds of stuff. So 5-MeO, that's one of the more serious ones. You really should have maybe some experience with other ones first. I mean, you know, there's always exception to the rules, but that one I've done 3 times. That one is a serious one where it will take you out of your body like that. You need to be a little prepared.
Yeah, because there's videos of it too online where people are screaming and shaking.
Yeah.
It looks horrifying, but then they share afterwards that it was really a cathartic experience. They were just saying the trauma passed through. So but at the same time, you have to be around a good facilitator to be able to handle that too.
I think that's very, very, very important, and that's a great, interesting subject that you brought up, because this is really important. Remember, all entheogens, the plant medicines, at their core, they're crystals. What do crystals do? They hold information. So I've talked to people that had clean, wonderful medicine. They know for sure it was clean, wonderful medicine. But the facilitator had negative energy, and they had really terrible experiences. So somehow that energy is getting transferred to the crystal matrix of the plant medicine, and then therefore getting transferred to the initiate. So that's something that you really, really, really have to be careful with. You want to make sure you have a good, solid practitioner. I think a lot of the people that are having bad experiences in the Amazon or anywhere, they're getting facilitators that aren't in alignment.
Yeah,
Because I've heard about women getting assaulted and things like that, and that's would be a terrible thing to go through. You don't want to be involved in anything like that, so you have to make sure you, get a legitimate shamanic practitioner.
yeah, because there's bad facilitators here in the States for sure. Because like
I've heard that too.
now because it's kind of trendy, so pretty much like so many people are calling themselves shamanists that clearly aren't. They have no right, they have no training. But now everyone just wants to do it. But even in like South America, there's a lot of bad shamans too, and like sexual assault is pretty big down there. Like it happened if you actually look at the threads. So and I can only imagine that because a lot of people that go down there, well, pretty much all have had some type of trauma. I mean, we all have, but there's a lot of people that already have had like sexual assault happen to them, and that's what they want to heal. Then they go down there and trust someone, and then it happens again. So it's just a terrifying cycle. And I just can't help but think, it's like, man, we gotta be doing better than this, as healers. But that's why it's I see it happen. It's definitely devastating. So it's like, and then that's just more trauma they have to heal from, and it's gonna be harder for them to trust like other facilitators too.
Well, the person that suffers the most from that, and people aren't going to understand my answer, but the person that suffers the most is the person that's perpetrating the sexual harassment or assault or whatever, because it's severely damaging their soul evolution. That's going on their karmic record.
Yeah, I can imagine karmically speaking. That's like I always say one of the worst things to do, but it
take advantage of a vulnerable person like that is a serious karmic crime. You don't want to go down that road.
And a lot of the people that do it once, they're generally repeat offenders who like do stuff like that down there until it finally comes out. Thankfully now, and this is crazily enough, just a more recent thing but people are speaking out about it more. So I'm kind of glad that's happening too, because for a while, but that's all what I can recommend is just people that are interested, just do your research. Like you can't there's no such thing as too much diligence when it comes to that, because like the mental preparation is important, but besides that, there's so many other factors to look into, because like I said, it could be either an amazing life-changing experience or it can traumatize you even further and set you back a lot as well.
Yeah, I've heard that. Unfortunately, all too often, it's harmed people, and that's sad to me. You don't want to have that experience.
No, it's like, and good shamans are becoming more rare, I think, too, because like when I went down to Iquitos, and I didn't know this before I got down, they're like, oh yeah, this is the Ayahuasca Disneyland. And I'm like, oh no. And then sure enough, it was all touristy and stuff. And I'm like, this isn't really what I envisioned, because well, at least the way I pictured it was like, it was the deep jungle and it was sacred. And whenever someone mentions Disneyland in the same sentence as that now, I'm like, oh,
it looks alluring, doesn't it? I've seen some of the pictures of beautiful beaches and the women are beautiful and like, everybody's in shape and like, good looking. It's like, but that's not what it's about. And
no.
People shouldn't be attracted to that. And if you have a successful plant medicine experience, you'll see through all of that.
Yeah. And it's like I've been through both good and bad, so I can just testify on both aspects of them. Like, and that's the thing. I when it first started, I didn't know, so I could see why that's the benefit of consulting a coach like you, because it really is. Yeah, it really was pretty crazy. Because especially this was, what was it, about 5 years ago. Yeah, it was like the plant medicine scene was like a real Wild West show in LA at that time for like those couple of years.
Yeah.
It's calmed down a little bit now, thankfully. But I guess part of it, the pandemic was like hard to come by. But yeah, it was pretty crazy too. But looking back on it, I probably would have benefited from consulting someone like you that had decades of experience with the plants under your belt.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And is there any other, for meditation-wise, do you recommend, is there anything like people can start with that, or you recommend getting like coached right away with that as well?
Well, I teach meditation. I've meditated so long now that I feel like I'm in a perpetual state of meditation. I feel like it's not something that you should practice all the time. You should be in the meditation all the time. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
I try not to go practice something. I try to live it, and it's not always possible in Southern California with traffic and rude people and unconscious stuff that goes on, and you can get angry or get pulled off center or whatever. But really, meditation, I think, is something that if you're on a spiritual path, you absolutely should be doing.
Yeah.
As much as possible.
That's how I got started into everything, was meditation. And it was so hard. I found it so boring at first because
I've heard that over and over again. I can't meditate. I'm so bored. I can't, shut off my mind or whatever. That's why it takes practice.
Yeah.
You have to practice it, that part of it. Yeah.
And because my first, I guess, like, glimpse of spirituality was reading a Taoist book, but really getting to spirituality, my first encounter was with Buddhism. So, because I had a friend who was getting into it, and that's what he would say too, like, oh, just keep at it, don't judge yourself, just do the best you can. So I would just like do it, just to, I don't want to say to get through it. Well, maybe at that stage I probably was, I know that's not how you're supposed to do it, but I just wanted to like set like a routine, and granted, like, maybe the whole sitting wasn't great, but I did find moments where I was doing it. So I was like, and I'd have to just like be proud of that. So, and just like see like what I got from that part of it at least. So, and you're right. I have heard that too. It's like we're supposed to be and not just do, and like we're human beings. So it's like, you're right. The goal is to basically incorporate that into your whole life and not just, sit for 10, 20 minutes in the morning and or night.
Yeah, if you can just do it for a little bit every day, you could even do it in the shower, or I meditate while I'm driving sometimes, just tune everything out and have a, relaxing music on, and hiking, I get into profound meditative states. It doesn't always have to be, in a lotus position somewhere. You don't have to put that kind of pressure on yourself,
Yeah, because just walking meditations.
Just find that calm, blissful place within, and try to hold it as long as you can.
And I know it's too long to discuss like everything, but do you want to touch on any of the other topics just briefly that are in your book? Like what else it covers as well?
Well, yes. We went into soul evolution a little bit. That's why I call it a soul hacker's guide to awakening, because this movie of 3D reality that we're in, you know about movies. Every movie has like a through line. Every screenplay has a through line, a story arc or whatever. And for me, life on Earth in 3D reality is about soul evolution. That's what I see when I look at a bird or an ant or a person or I don't know, any kind of animal or creature. So how do we rapidly advance our soul evolution so we don't have to keep repeating these painful, traumatic incarnations? The goal of your lifetime really should be about not having future lifetimes. Now, people look at me like, well, I love being on planet Earth. That's fine. Be an angel then. What are angels? There are people like you and I that no longer have karma to pay back. So they don't have to incarnate on a physical plane if they don't want to anymore. That should be an option. You shouldn't be pulled back into a 3D incarnation by your past, deeds. I am getting excited and using my hands. Sorry about that.
It's a good topic.
Your past deeds and what are called sanskaras by one of my teachers, Avatar Mayor Baba, calls them sanskaras. So I call them sanskaric deeds. like, these things that you do during your life that will follow you. The energy will follow you into your next incarnation. So, like Ravi Shankar is a good example. He has a huge, big scar around his neck. He knows for sure he was beheaded in his past lifetime. So these things can even manifest onto you physically. So what's life really about? It's like reducing, these things from past lifetimes and cleaning up your karma and stuff like that, so you don't have to go through anything in future lifetimes that causes pain and suffering.
Oh, that's great. And is there any last piece of advice that either we didn't touch on or you just want to expand on that we did cover?
Touch on.
'Cause
Oh, we didn't talk much about extraterrestrials. That was one of the things that we were supposed to talk
Oh, yeah,
about.
yeah, no, that's yeah. Because you don't just talk about just extraterrestrials, like you talk about their technology or structures they have here.
Well, a lot of what's going on with extraterrestrials now. I'm going to tell the story of this Russian physicist that I looked in. It was about a year ago, and I can't remember his name. He mysteriously died, and all of his files and everything were stolen at a conference in Canada. But he was experimenting with frequency and sound. He was taking like chicken eggs, and as the embryo was developing, he was recording the sound of that, amplifying it like 6,000 times. And then he set up this chamber. He broadcast that sound through a chamber while duck eggs were developing. Okay, so when the duck eggs hatched, they had chicken features. So what is DNA? What are we? We're a frequency band. So these reptilians that have come here in grays, they exist in a different frequency band. Like the reptilians, I don't want to get into this too much because I don't want to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole or anything like that. But planetary system is kind of like a cell phone. It comes with apps on it already. And one of the things, because remember, we're in a universe of duality, opposite energies. This is one of the things that you always complimented me on in my posts, how opposite energies are needed in a physical universe to keep form from formlessness. So there has to be this pull back and forth of opposite energies to maintain a physical universe. So on planet Earth, there's portals that are both positive and negative. Indigenous people know about these negative portals. They won't go anywhere near them. They're like, oh, we're not going over there. And they're all over the world. So what happens is beings like reptilians, they don't have to exist in a physical form. They can become non-physical in a lower energy frequency band and download themselves onto a planetary system. And as the humans develop that are in that negative portal area, they start to take on these reptilian features. They look more reptilian. They're in a lower frequency band. They don't have the same soul or compassion that we have. Just like the Russian physicist turned a duck into a chicken by a frequency band. These lower frequency bands, and they're very specific and very mathematical, they're turning regular human beings into these reptilians. That's how I think they really travel. They don't travel in big, gigantic spaceships and land and then invade people and all this stuff. That's something out of the movies.
Yeah.
They come here as a non-physical frequency band that gets downloaded into different planetary systems. And definitely Earth was one where the reptilians downloaded themselves into. And my guess is the reptilians originated in a more dense previous universe. Just like we had reptilian type beings, dinosaurs that lived here for millions of years. You know, they ruled this planet for millions of years. The reptilians that are in this lower frequency band that downloaded themselves here, they could have been from a denser previous universe and then downloaded themselves into our universe.
Oh.
That's what I think.
And do you think
You know,
aliens are portrayed in the movies like as kind of like monster creatures to make the concept ridiculous and to like make a lot of people just scoff at it, like, oh, that's crazy?
we have to be kind of careful with Hollywood because they have, a certain agenda. I don't want to get into that, but there's people that involved in that matrix that don't really have the best interests of the movie watchers at heart, So there's manipulation going on there through these entertainment systems, music industry as well. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because I don't want to get blocked and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, but like as it ties into what we started with, just that there could be subliminal messages and things like that, and to keep people in a lower frequency
absolutely.
state. Like that does make sense.
And it's good for us people on a spiritual path to stay in the higher frequency, and sometimes it's hard to do. And some of what they do makes sense because they know we're in a universe of duality and they've just decided to work with the opposite side, the opposite energy, and I think for me, the big lie is people using this term, these two words, the big lie, the big lie. The biggest lie on planet Earth is that we're slaves to them. The opposite is true. They are destroying their soul evolution by controlling people and putting out all these lower thought forms and malevolent thought forms and messages, all this stuff that's going on that these people at the top are doing. They're damaging themselves, and what it's doing to us is it's waking people up in massive numbers, people seeing through this. Oh, I see what kind of energies they're working with. I don't want to be a part of that. I want to be on the opposite side. So I wouldn't say, people have said, well, they must be divine then. I don't know if I want to go that far, or even necessary evil. I don't even know if I want to say that. I wish they weren't here, but remember, we're in duality. So it takes the two energies to maintain the form. So there'll always be that opposite, like Luciferian frequency band going on. Now there are universes that aren't in duality. There's just universes of light and astral planets. Higher astral planes are supposed to be really, really beautiful and unlike anything here on Earth. And then above that, there's the causal, which is like the idea realm, which you can create your own infinite universes. That's the closest thing to heaven that they talk about in. And that's where you want to go.
Yeah.
That's where you want to go.
Yeah, well, based on what you described, it must be a really hard sell to get people to leave the astral plane if there's this like place where it's just bliss, and to come back to this place where it's just pain, misery, betrayal. So it's like, I guess you really want to have your soul evolve to want to come back here and get to learn
you get
some
pulled
lessons.
back. You get pulled back, and we didn't talk about this much, and I know maybe we're running out of time here, but I want to go over this really quick.
Oh yeah.
There's binding agents in the 3D reality, Earth reality, to be incarnated here. And I like teaching by telling stories. Let's say you and I, we're brothers. We're good Christians. We go to church every week. We meditate a little bit. And we're antique jewelry dealers. Okay, so we've got this incredible collection of antique jewelry. Beautiful. We get written up in magazines. Johnny and Rod, they have the best antique jewelry collection in all of United States. We win awards, all this stuff. We go around to shows and blah, blah, blah. Okay, we get in a car accident. We're both critically injured in a car accident. We're good Christians. We go to church every week. We're both laying on our deathbed. In our final hour, what are we thinking about?
Not the business, right?
99 out of 100 people thinking about their jewelry business.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's that binding agent. It's that
draws us. Wow.
It draws you back to more incarnations. And it could be anything. It could be resentment, jealousy, anger, greed. What if we're brothers and I secretly hate you? Then that's even more of a difficult next incarnation. Got to work out like how to not hate my brother and how to not be attached to a jewelry business. You know what I mean? So we're constantly working these things out from lifetime to lifetime. So what is the secret of life then? It's reducing these binding agents, these things that pull us back into future incarnations. So we don't have to be reincarnated then. We can come back at our own will. Like Mahavatar Babaji, one of the great yogis of India that taught Paramahansa Yogananda, he can move his body from the higher astral planes, and he can materialize his atoms into a physical earth plane at will. That's where you want to be. You don't want to have to keep being pulled back, and like the Tibetans call it, this wheel of samsara, these conflictive emotions that keep pulling you back into more and more lifetimes. And then you have a lifetime where you're a rock star, and you have all these people loving you, worshiping you, and you believe that you're God, and you're laying on your deathbed, and I'm God, I'm a rock star. Oh my God, I don't want to die. I don't want to die because I'm going to not be a rock star anymore. Well, guess what? That's going to pull you right back into more future incarnations. So
that's interesting. And while I like to think that humans are more evolved, like in our final moments, we'd be thinking of, what's ahead, but that actually makes sense, and you're probably right. To say is probably think of something petty that a lot of us just get drawn right back.
I know it's true because I've known people that have worked in like end of life things, and that's all they're thinking about is their real estate and their bank accounts, and then their families come in and lay the heavy trips on them. You owe Bobby Joe $15,000 from 20 years ago, and all this stuff. And people laying in their deathbed should not be focused on this stuff.
No. Yeah. But I have heard from people that worked at hospice have say similar things, like, or sometimes like the children won't visit them at all or something. So I'm sure that causes
resentment, anger,
having other feelings come up, like you said.
Yeah.
But thanks. This was an interesting discussion, to say the least.
Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you for coming on. And if someone wants to reach out to you, where do you recommend? Like, if they want to do your coaching, and also where can they find your book? So 2-part question.
Okay. You can find me at quantumshamanics.com. And my email is qshamanics@gmail.com. And my whole bio is online.
And they can purchase the book there too?
The book isn't on there yet. The book is on Amazon.
Okay.
And I'm going to be moving the book onto my website. I was getting ready to do all that when the book came out at the end of 2019, and a little something called COVID-19 hit, and I got really sidetracked, but I'm getting back on track now. So the book will be on the website soon.
Oh, that's great. And I'm glad you got to listen to Rod's talk today. It was amazing getting to interview him. Please like, follow, and subscribe so you'll be notified when the next one comes out. I started Patreon. Any amount you can donate is greatly appreciated. Thank you for tuning in today. Be seeing you.
You've been listening to the Dystopian Renaissance. Spirituality, healing, consciousness, truth. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review the show. And tell a friend or two. That would help also. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at the Dystopian Renaissance. And please find the website at www.thedystopianrenaissance.com.